Welcome to Leadership Line of Sight. My name is Taylor. I'm the marketing strategist at Gravidia, and this is the podcast where we talk about leadership. We talk to leaders so that you can see leadership maybe inside of you or someone that you know. Sometimes it's our kids, but that's what we're trying to give you more examples of. And what a great example today. Today, I'm with Cody Morash. She is the manager of multi-suite products and services at TELUS Business. And Cody, it is so good to see you.
Great to see you, Taylor. Thank you so much for having me today.
I'm excited to chat with you because, I think that the landscape has changed. How long have you been in corporate business?
Oh my gosh. I started off at not TELUS about 18 years ago. I've been with TELUS in the business world, so selling to businesses, creating value for businesses for 14 years now. And things have shifted a lot. They always change, I think, within the business landscape, but obviously the past 2 years have been, earth shaking, as we all know. But it's interesting to see the variations on the theme, I guess.
The variations on the theme. Really, when we talk about the last couple of years, obviously, nobody had a handbook for pandemic. But when it comes to teams and the landscape and culture, what do you see?
Well, I think so. You're right. Nobody's had a handbook for how to deal with a pandemic, but what I think has become more forefront is that our teams are made up of individual people and they all have these challenges, and that just became more apparent over the past 2 years. I think mental health has not been given the thought that it needed to be given as we look to how we support our teams, and a lot of things were maybe just a little bit more glossed over until we had this absolute worldwide crisis that made so much of this kind of bubble up to the surface. And people that may have been kind of barely hanging on and probably needed to have more of those how are you really doing conversations. I think the cracks just started to show a bit more. And so that's kind of what I mean when I say variations on a theme is that I think this just hyper heightened a lot of the themes that we see as leaders and the challenges we help our teams to solve.
Yeah, I think that during something like a crisis, we just assume that everybody's not okay. So why ask?
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course you're not okay. You have to just stay in your house all the time.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is when you're not in a crisis, you assume everyone is okay. So you kind of don't have to ask. And that's the bit of a variation. Or we ask, but we ask it in that really North American way. Hey, how you doing? As we're passing each other in a hallway, going opposite directions, and nobody stops to hear the answer anyway. So it's why did we bother asking? And so the thing that's really driven home for me, especially over that past couple of years, is no, we actually need to ask, and we need to stop and listen to the answer, good, bad, indifferent. It's all for me become so much more of how you build trust, and it's so basic that it maybe shouldn't have taken this to figure that out. I don't know.
Yeah, I always look at it like we didn't drop from civility, we rose from savagery. So every little step of the way to being more decent, to treating people better, to every little ounce of empathy, I see as a win, because it's not like it's missing. We're trying to form it. We've got a big interior part of our brain that doesn't do civil things. And we have this little thin outside layer that's just trying to keep us all together,
Barely holding us on it sometimes, right?
Yeah. And man, did we ever see that during the pandemic. I have this theory on road rage where when people are in cars, it's the closest thing they come to death on the regular. So that means that they have these heightened reactions when somebody bothers them, right? But it also kind of strips away all the other layers of how they look at people, because they're people in cars. You barely get a glance. And then for some reason, they just summarize as everybody going slower than you is an idiot, and anybody going faster than you is a maniac. And I think that was something that showed through in pandemic. When COVID first started coming out, we started to see more people wearing masks. I think that the thing that masks did the most effectively was show compliance. Like we were kind of looking around at everybody, like, are you a threat? You know, is COVID in you? And then when we started to see people wearing masks, I think that a lot of people had less of that road rage reaction. What did you see?
Wow, that's a really interesting take, and I hadn't thought of it that way. I am an inherent rule follower, so I have family members who, always tease me and they say like, "Let's rebel with caution," um, because I think rules can be a really good thing, and structure is a very good thing, and so it's my reaction to masking and to elevator capacity limits and all of these things. Um, it has been maybe a little bit different than others because of this inherent need to like follow rules. And I mean, don't get me wrong, if I patently disagree with something, I am going to like argue to death about it, and I stick up for people when I feel in my core that they're right. But my husband and I were recently in South America where we were, there was a lot of masking and a lot of social distancing, and even people outside were wearing N95 masks. And this was just a few weeks ago. And of course, here we don't have masking. People are starting to, I think, embrace it a little bit more again as school is coming back in, and the September October flu is, and all the back to school germs are happening, but it's not common here. But there it was this, oh, don't get on the elevator with me, you're not wearing a mask. It was super strange because we've lived through 2.5 years of this. I think most of us have had COVID at least once. And so it was interesting how I like to kind of see my own reactions in real time. My husband's like, what's going on with you? I'm like, I don't know. It's just, these are the rules here. We need to follow. They're not hurting anybody. In fact, you could argue that, it could still be helping. It's probably a neutral, but it was just, yeah. So it was interesting, and I definitely your metaphor of the road rage to the masking is what am I seeing around me as a threat? It's interesting where I see, okay, well, I think I interpret that as you're following the rules that have been put in place by people who are supposedly experts, or driving policy or whatever, and so if you are bucking the trend there, where else are you that you may be then being a threat to me, I think is how I'm interpreting it, but I'm still working to unpack that a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder about places like that because like the access to information here isn't amazing. Like when we take a look at how people actually operate, a lot of them are operating with information from months and months ago. It just travels kind of slowly. A lot of it's like not on our radar. You ask somebody about current events that doesn't pay attention. I think that more people get their news off Facebook than anywhere else.
Yeah, I think the 24-hour news cycle has kind of burnt a lot of people out, and so that exhaustion drives them to look at other things, or maybe it becomes a little bit more feeling like a soap opera. Like I have I caught up a month ago. I'm good. I'll wait for another month, and then we'll see, but nothing will really have changed. So this it's an interesting way that we view the news societally right now, and again how that impacts other people, because some people have become so hyper focused, and like they need to be connected to that 24-hour news cycle constantly on multi-channeling it, and yeah, so you get different reactions. Absolutely.
And that's something that I found with the people around me is that coming out of COVID, the thing that I look at post COVID is that how many people don't dream anymore. And what I mean by that is that we ended up getting into this real reactive state where everything was coming to us, that we stopped setting long-term goals, and our goal setting got shorter and shorter. And now when you ask people what they're really looking forward to and what they're planning for, a lot of them, they sound like they're just getting towards that.
Yeah, and I think I see that with the people around me as well. Like a lot of people still aren't like comfortable booking a big vacation. They're scared that it's canceled again. And career conversations have definitely changed with a lot of folks, where you maybe had somebody who like had it all figured out in their own head where they wanted to go and what was going to excite them, and it's made us really question the viability of any kind of long-term planning, but also what is truly important to us. Like, where are our hearts and where are our mindsets right now?
So let's take this into your world. Like right now, you're manager of multi-suite products and services. How does that work on the daily? Are are you working as part of a team?
Yeah, so I have an amazing team that I've worked with most of them for many, many years in various capacities. You know, hyper driven team across the board. Um, and a lot of what we do relies on not working in a silo and coming together and brainstorming and talking problems through and figuring out, okay, if a hotelier is facing this challenge, how can we use technology to help them in a way that maybe we have to be innovative in how we're trying to help solve problems. Um, but your point about like people don't dream anymore, I think that also this is also kind of taken a hit towards creativity. It got kind of hard to think about the art of the possible. I think the early part of the pandemic, everyone was like, okay, let's innovate like crazy and let's figure this out. And then that gets exhausting. And you can't be innovative 100% of the time. It doesn't work, right? You need downtime, you need white space. But when everything kind of like becomes the same, and especially that first kind of year of pandemic, there was so much sameness that it makes it hard to envision a difference, but also to give yourself that space to get creative, because there's no change in the environment to help spark that creativity from an
Yeah, and I
external
wonder how
environment.
much innovation has gone in one direction during pandemic and now changing, right? Like we wanted to take everything online before, and now offline experiences are valued.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we see that a lot in, the reactions to the pandemic that are now, as we're living with some of those reactions, are starting to unwind themselves and have these very serious kind of knock-on effects. Absolutely, everything moving to virtually overnight, um, was the right thing to do. But I don't think that we, as humans and society, really understood the effects of that kind of long term. And again, back from a mental health perspective, and maybe some of the younger generations, like were better equipped for it because they have grown up in this dual dual space where the metaverse is as real as human interaction. um but nothing replaces that. Nothing replaces a hug, right? That was the common theme in the first few months, right? Like it was the sadness of these virtual hugs, and that gets, yeah, it doesn't leave a lot of space for that coming together. I'm actually at my office tower today. I'm not a work from homer, and so the pandemic was like super challenging, because I feed off other people's energy. I'm probably most effective in an airport or a hotel lobby bar because I can feel the buzz and the energy, and
Mm.
it's something that I feed off of. And so it's been interesting to see the extroverts on my team versus the introverts on my team. And then, of course, it's a spectrum. So we can be landing anywhere in the middle, but to see how all of this has really um, affected people and at different times, right? People feel it at different times. There seem to be waves for each person, and you never know when they're going to hit. And so, back to like, you have to just ask and truly care about the answer of like, how are you today? Like, are
Mhm.
you like, what's going on in your world? Like where do we need to be spending some time and carving out some space? Is it for human interaction? Is it to keep you behind a screen? Is it cameras off day? Like what's the right answer for you today?
So that kind of speaks to your leadership, right? It sounds like the people that are near you, that's one of the things that you feel as though you do as a leader is check in.
I try. I think I need, like, with everything, everyone could probably do a better job at that. I also am highly cognizant of like the over check in with my team. Like, no, we said we're fine. Right? Like I don't want like I don't know what's wrong with you. Am I not being clear? Like I don't want to get to that point. But I do really truly try, and I try and give everybody, like I said, space. I know a lot of places it's become hyper normalized to always have the camera on, and I know for myself that can be really exhausting. And so I try to not assume that everybody is just that comfortable with it. Or necessarily always in a space that supports it, because you could have renovations going on around you. We could be in airports. We could be anywhere right now with anything going around us in our space. And I try not to question why it's a cameras off day. If that's your comfort zone, like, I try to just give that space.
That's I think that that's a good read on it, is because like sometimes these things don't get expressed when they feel as though it's going to be like interrogation time.
Yeah. And I think there's so much, like when we talked about the innovation of like everything moving online, it then all of a sudden became your camera is on all of the time, your audio is on all of the time. You as a person have to be on 100% of the time, because it's completely different to have this kind of a conversation. If you and I were sitting, across a cup of coffee from each other, I probably would be act like my gestures would be a little bit different. I'm a hand talker, so like let's leave that out of it. But I find that it's the being on, like worrying about, is there a smile on my face? Do I have like that resting angriness look happening, even though I'm not? Like, what are people reading in my body language that because they're not in a room with me, like there's so much nuance that you lose in the 2 dimension. So it begs a lot of questions for me, which is hyper exhausting. So
yeah, I could see that. And I didn't really think about that, but it was kind of like during COVID, there was a percentage of people that felt like they were on house arrest.
Yeah, I think so.
Like just under massive monitoring. Now, for you working in a communications company, that must have been this massive endeavor. Like I would think that you guys must have grown massively during the pandemic. So many people needed you.
Oh gosh, it's so TELUS is a really interesting organization in that we had started to embrace what we call work styles 14 plus years ago. It was one of the things that I loved when I first joined this organization, was that I could work from home, a day or so a week. I could flex my schedule around a dentist appointment. I was allowed to be human and have a job. And that was 14 years ago. And then we moved towards this complete work styles environment where almost every part of the organization, I'm sure somebody will tell me that I'm wrong there, but from my perspective, like almost every area of the organization had that flexibility. And then the office environment started to change a little bit, and you saw this kind of wave of people just moving away from the office, and then you kind of saw this wave of people starting to come back going, oh wow, I actually need like real life human interaction. So we'd gone through part of that shift, I think, a lot earlier than a lot of organizations. It's not to say it hasn't continued to morph for us, but everybody in the organization is enabled. Again, I'll say everybody, most folks are enabled with your cell phone, your laptop, and so you can work anywhere. And so when the pandemic hit, and actually in Calgary, it was rather interesting. We were supposed to move into this brand new office in March of 2020. So everyone had packed. So everyone had gone and started working remotely, knowing we had a couple weeks where there was going to be a move, and then we would just roll on into this beautiful new office at the end of March. And then that didn't happen. So it was that weird, like all my things are packed and they're at the office, and I don't actually know what I forgot to take home with me. And because we'd been packed prior to a pandemic kind of hitting. We all saw it coming, and everyone, if you remember the optimism of February and March of 2020, it was like, oh yeah, we're just going to stay at home for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then it was, oh, this will be over in 2 or 3 months. So the extreme optimism was really interesting. But I will add, so the Calgary office team had mostly moved outside of the office space when everything hit. We were all kind of enabled to work remotely and to have that flexibility. But that first few weeks was like absolutely everybody was working from home now, not just those of us who worked in a communications environment and had access to tech 24/7. And so it was upgrading the networks. It was ensuring that educators could leverage the network to do their online classes. It was ensuring that every other organization could do virtual meetings. And in fact, the first few weeks, we were all asked to be off camera to save the bandwidth for our customers. And so it was so yeah, it's been a really interesting shift from that perspective when you look at, save the bandwidth for everybody else who needs it, and then it's like, oh, but now just be on camera 100% of the time. Yeah, it's been really, really interesting. And then of course, we had to flex folks very quickly into other roles as call centers in the Philippines and Guatemala were closed because of the curfew, the stringent curfews that were put online. So, we had a lot of our team members that went to work with phones to help with ensuring that things just got done. And so there was so much grit and just determination and desire to just help, within our communities during that time. And then it was rolling just back into your day job. And I don't think we ever stopped to pause and go, like, how is everybody's energy level? Like, how are we all doing? This was intense. This was a period when a lot of companies and a lot of people were not working at all, and we were working like exponentially longer days and weekends just to try and keep the lights on and keep things moving for everybody else. And so we didn't have that time to pause and check in, and that's something I think we've all kind of learned and really started to focus on, especially this last year and a half. Yeah, it's been interesting, and we had a head start, I guess.
It's neat to hear about such a large organization shifting internally like that, right? And that's a lot to orchestrate. I didn't even think about the thought that you guys would be using less video to mean that there was more bandwidth for others. That's something that it's pretty wild. Now, this is the situation that we just went through, but how far back did it start? So let's go back in time a little bit and talk about how you ended up here. How did you end up doing what you do now?
Wow, not a straight line, because I think that's not like, which is probably more common than not. I started off in marketing and communications and events, and absolutely loved it. It was a great kind of first out of college job, to go do event marketing and get to do all the fun stuff at every off hour you can imagine, plus having a day job on top of that. But when I joined TELUS, it was in small business marketing, and really trying to understand what a very small business owner would look like, and creating personas and doing a lot of really fun and interesting things. And our team, the manager of our team left. I was an individual contributor at the time. There was a situation that kind of left a sudden vacancy, and I started picking up what I could just to try and help. And that's how I landed in a leadership role in the first place, which was kind of accidentally tripping and falling and just being in the right place at the right time. With I'll add that it's not just luck, because there's also the attitude that goes along with wanting to grow and to do more, and having had the conversations with my leader about where I wanted my career to go, because I think that's something that we often miss. We assume a lot that people can read our minds, and they can't. Like, weirdly enough. And so so that was how I wound up in a management role. But then I took a sideways step, and I went back to an individual contributor role to take on an entirely new challenge and to grow a segment of the business that we had, again, tripped and fallen into. I think trips and falls are kind of the hallmark of my career path, as awkward as that might sound. And I took on an individual contributor role to create a program that has become our multi-suite environment. So, like, focusing on hotels and seniors living and those types of environments. And then organically grew that back into a team and became an official team leader again. But mentorship was always a big part of what I was doing in that sort of in between span of not having a team. Like, trying to ensure that I'm continuing to flex that muscle was always really important. Because there's always a lot to learn. So, like, the one thing I've probably learned about leadership is there's always more to learn, and always a new style of somebody around you that you don't quite get how to lead yet.
Interesting. Is there anything that you do, like, to sharpen yourself in that aspect?
I read a lot. I ask questions. I have my peer network within TELUS, and when I bump into any type of personality or preferred way of working that is not one that I have had experience in leading and helping to unlock that type of potential, I definitely go to my network and have conversations about how can I help this person. I don't get this thing that they do because we are because we're on opposite ends of a spectrum in a lot of cases. So how do I help them? How do I get to that? Like, how do I understand better? So yeah, side conversations, working your network, just like having those collaborative, safe places, mentorship. I guess it's peer mentorship, and reading and just trying to look at different perspectives. EQ.
Is there anything that you would recommend as far as reading goes?
What would I recommend as far as reading goes? An oldie but a goodie, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
I like that one too.
It's been years and years. It is perennially next to my desk at my home office. I think it's an incredible thing to go back to as I've built teams over time. To just go back and relook at the different areas of where we can have conflict within the team, because it's not because leading is not just your one-on-one relationships. Obviously, it's how is everybody else meshing and how is everybody else working together. And you don't want a team of clones. That's the worst thing you can do, to not have diversity of thought. But when you don't have clones, you have a lot of opportunity for conflict. So finding ways to work through that.
Yeah, and it seems to be like that's part of it, is getting people to work together, but then the other part of it seems to be that effectiveness. Like and really when it kind of lends itself to what you do, businesses now are teams of humans and computers working together to achieve goals. And that's the fishy part too, because all of those personality types seem to have a different perception of technology.
Yeah, I think working within a technology company, we're maybe a little bit more insulated from that that kind of continuum of early adopter all the way to laggard, within a technology construct, just by nature of the fact that this is what we do day in, day out. But there are definitely people who embrace change, whether it be technologically or in any other aspect, process-wise, any other aspect of their lives more than others. And so change management has absolutely become a consistent theme within our team. But we also have started to take the lens of how that plays out to our customers as well. And so it's been interesting to see, the way it all comes back to communication in my mind. Like trust and communication, if you've got those two kind of things, I think you can probably overcome almost anything. But you have to have an environment of trust, means that you're going to get the communication out of people as well. So I've totally lost the plot on your question at this point.
No, you're doing great. And I like that you're just streaming. You're just sharing your thoughts, because really, like, to recap, what you were talking about is in like technology wasn't really a big factor because you have so many people that are opted in, right? So many people come to work with you because you're a technology company, so they kind of have an affinity for that. And so if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that the offline still needs to be online, though. It's still like just relationships with people based on trust and communication.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. And that's where the change management piece was coming in. We've been going through some system changes at TELUS that have caused some stress and some concern with folks. Anytime you're changing, to a new system, that when it's your day to day, it means you have to learn like a whole new user interface and a whole new, basically, language, right? Even if you just think about the differences between accessing email through a service, a program like Outlook versus through a browser, things are in different places. Your workflow is a little bit different, and so working through that, when people are really busy, they go, "Oh, another change." And it doesn't matter if it's a new technology or just a new process or a new toy. I guess technology and toys is goes hand in hand a lot with what we do, but looking at how to help people to really embrace the opportunities that these present and focus more on the opportunities, as opposed to like, well, this is what I liked more about this other thing, and it was so much better. Like trying to
That's got to be
reframe.
that's got to be a big thing about the companies that you help, right? Is like so many of those companies go shopping for technology without a grocery list. And what I mean by a grocery list is a grocery list of their actual problems, right? Like, I think that when you're seeking technology for a solution, you should be like, okay, what's this going to solve in my business? Let's go. But so many other people look at it like, oh, what's that? I like that. And then they'll sell them the problem that it solves. But that's not one of their problems. How do you help companies get organized so they're actually effective?
I think there's a few things that we and I'm going to use our broader team as an example here because that's where my expertise is, and I don't want to speak on other people's behalf, but you're totally right. Some people approach shopping for technology as this is the need I have to fill, and others approach it as this is shiny and cool, and I really want to play with this thing. So like, what is the like? Help me find a rationale for it. And I, the unique thing about the business space that we play in is that we sell to customers, but we service the end user. And so we need to find that happy medium between these are the shiny things that your end users might be asking for because they're seeing them in other environments.
Mm.
And this is how it can solve your business challenges at the same time. So marrying the two worlds. But the other, like when you're selling to businesses as well, that sounds very simple. And it's not at all because you're selling to a procurement team or an IT team or a management team, or in the depending on how large the organization is, of course, that those teams can all be one person, and so you have varying levels of expertise. So you need to be able to kind of relay your messaging in a clear and simple way that is easy enough for the least technological person, layman, to understand, but isn't presented in a demeaning way for those who are like absolute tech experts. And so my colleague on the marketing side and her team do an absolutely incredible job of doing this day in and day out, and translating our products and services that my team creates into both types of communication. Like, here's how it solves your business problem. Here's how it solves this need to have the shiny and the new that you're hearing from your users, and here's what it means to you. And they're an interesting team in that they can go very, very deep on the technical side, which is not necessarily the norm for a true kind of customer marketing organization. They're an amazing group.
That's awesome. And it sounds like you have a good feedback loop there. So you're designing products for them to work based on the feedback they bring back to you.
Absolutely. Actually, just yesterday we got some great feedback from the team from a number of interactions that they've had very recently, and so it's wonderful to see. We're a very close team. We all kind of roll up into the same place, so we have the opportunity to stay super hyper connected. And there's a lot of the programs that we try to launch actually kind of sit in the middle between product and marketing, and so it's whoever has the passion gets to take on some of these projects, which is a lot of fun. But yeah, we're very lucky to have that feedback loop because otherwise you wind up designing things that you think make sense with zero feedback, and they fall flat in markets. And that's discouraging for anyone on it who's working on the team to think that they've done such a cool job and created this amazing thing, but nobody wants it.
Yeah, target market fit is like that's like the lightning. Like if you make a great product and then it finds a spot in the market, that's something that is more likely not to happen than to actually happen, no matter how valiant your attempt.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
But you were talking a lot about like falling down as part of the way that you came up, right? And I think that that's also part of how teams get to the win is that they have to like navigate through these losses.
Yeah. If it hasn't become clear, I am eternally grateful for the men and women on my team. They're incredible people. A lot of us came from an environment on a subset group within TELUS where grit and determination and fast failure and ambiguity were the norm. And just try something. Not everything we try is going to work. That's totally okay. Take your learnings from it and move on, and don't kind of wallow in the, oh my gosh, I failed. You learn more from failing than you do from succeeding. And so being in an environment that encouraged and fostered that, I think helped us all to just be more willing to try something, even if it sounds totally crazy. And some of our brainstorming sessions can get like, there can be some really wonky ideas, which I love, because we don't really have that fear of failure. Because like, what is the worst thing that can happen? Is that we maybe create something that doesn't quite fit in the market. Well, cool, we'll go back and tweak it. We'll take the feedback and improve it from there, which is at the end of the day going to give us a better product than if we just take feedback at a point in time, create something based on that that's super static. So being able to fast fail gives you an ability to be more agile to market needs, I think, as well.
Interesting. So like, what type of technologies are exciting to you when you kind of cast further into the future? Like next 5 years, what do you see as being like something that will be important to these business clients?
Automation. And I think that, is an exciting kind of buzzword. A few years ago, it was everything needed to be in the cloud, and there was some ambiguity about what that meant. And I think there's still a lack of understanding about like, what does automation really mean, and how does that
Why didn't
help
they
me
just
in
call
my
the cloud someone else's computer?
right?
Like, why did we need to call it? Who thought that it needed to have a marketing term like the cloud that doesn't pass the grunt test? Like when you say the cloud, people still don't know what you mean.
No, and and this comes back to like our desire to always have like very clear communication that like just makes that people can understand, and sanity checking that, because the cloud is such an ambiguous term. It's kind of funny. And I think in a lot of cases, automation is too, just like wireless can be ambiguous. I remember an interaction a few years ago. We were talking about Wi-Fi networks for hotels. So like a lot of years ago, because now they think every hotel has a Wi-Fi network. But we went in and we were looking at this property, and they had run cabling to every room, but then they cut it all off when they placed new flooring, because in their minds everything was going to be wireless, just like everything's going to the cloud. And it's like, but somewhere this still needs to connect.
It needs to come in somehow
to something. And so I kind of feel like this is where like automation is kind of the next evolution of all of these things, is the next ambiguous thing. What does automation mean? And where on the back end of that automation is there actually still a human and still somebody intercepting? Because we don't truly have machines running everything in the background. We can build scripts, and we can build, some robotic process automation pieces, and we can build these really cool technologies that will allow us to use our voice to turn on and off the lights. But at the end of the day, that light bulb is still connected to electricity, to an electrical outlet or a battery, right? Like, and so all of these things are still relying on much older underpinning foundational technologies. And I think that's the future that excites me, is what we can automate and what pieces of an interior space we can bring together and have just working, automating, like keeping your space at a consistent temperature by not just adjusting the thermostat, but raising and lowering blinds, and ensuring that the air quality is consistent as well. And that's all great. There's machine learning on top of that, but at the end of the day, these are still blinds, and you still have heat vents, and these are all still manual things. And so really figuring out the interplay there, and how to make all of that more, I think, clear and play together seamlessly is the exciting future.
Even when you take a look at like what you're trying to do is empower the people, right? Like humans are the highest resource. We talk about AI and people talk about it like it's the cloud. Like, okay, anything that is like, a lot of people think automations are AI. A lot of people confuse machine learning with AI. That's probably the most consistent one. But they also don't understand why you would want this. And I think that if you thought about how effective you'd be about writing a test, right? Now, if we lower the room temperature in that room by 10 degrees, it will totally change your outcome.
Mhm.
If we raise it by 10 degrees, it will change your outcome. If we feed you or don't feed you. But these environmental things are like something that actually massively impacts productivity. You know how many people get up from their desk to adjust the blinds, and then that's where the distraction starts? Or they're interrupted by the fact that they're not comfortable. Those are the things that actually like kind of steal. And if over the day the blinds were slowly moving with the sun and the HVAC system knew what other devices were doing to help regulate temperature, and so it changed the way that it ran, you'd be way more effective. It's interesting to see that, like, as much as it is computers, the end result is the humans.
Yeah, the human factor, like that's why we exist. That's why we're trying to always do cool new things. Um, and I think a lot of people are starting to expect now in a commercial environment that these technologies, are where they're at from a consumer environment, which is incredibly difficult. And
We need
I
to
mean,
spend more time in commercial buildings. The heat, it goes some places.
it's terrible. I have a sweater and a blanket here because I know that by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm going to be freezing, even though I'm wearing a sweater today, and it's going to be, 21 degrees this afternoon. Um, yeah, it doesn't quite get there. But when I think about my own home, it's not there yet either, right? Like, so the technologies exist, and now, and to properly automate them, we need integration, and that's where the difficulty lies, and that's where the opportunity lies. And then you think about somebody who might be living in a senior's home. How do you ensure that their comfort, so their experience in that home is the best it can be? And that it was a tough environment over the past couple of years, obviously, through the pandemic with lockdown. So how do you make sure that you're delivering maybe a better quality of life than they would get? Yes, a better quality of life than what they would get if they were to stay in their own home. And how do you ensure that this, kind of historically forgotten group of people is treated better in the future?
Mhm.
And those are and that's where automation can really make a difference, I think, and helping from a healthcare perspective to ensure better health outcomes for these folks who are living in these communal environments. And that's, yeah, so that's where I see the next, and where I see the excitement is how we can create smarter spaces that don't just connect people to the internet, and to the world through a TV screen, but really ensure that the entire environment is exactly customizable to how they want to work and interact with it and use it.
Yeah, you can take this so far. When you take a look at the challenges that we run into, like for me, I look at like automation and machine learning, and one of the things I think about is driving. Like every year in the United States, people effectively vote that they would rather text than drive to the tune of about 10,000 lives, right? And that's something that we should just recognize. Okay, I get it. You would rather not drive. Can we have computers do this? Now, at the same time, when you take a look at, seniors trying to maintain their independence, think about the things that commonly run into concern. A lot of people are concerned about, can we check on them?
Hmm.
Well, now technology could totally be capable of noticing when one person is in a spot they're not normally for too long, right? Like these things are things that you can do without having cameras everywhere. They like tracking is so much easier than it was, but then the little things that take away independence, right? The little things like being able to travel up and down the stairs. We used to use these massive, expensive devices, and now that's something that technology is offering us more improvements with, more electric motors and things like that. But the little things, like did we turn off the stove? Those types of things I think are really like what's next.
Absolutely. And doing it in a way that doesn't feel like Big Brother or like somebody's babysitting them
Mhm.
constantly, right? And I mean things like, did I forget to turn off the stove? I have a gas stove at home. It, the first gas stove I had installed at this house had a super unreliable lever on it. And so, it's not just, this is like, we need to look at these technologies as well, not just in terms of our aging populations, but there are actual safety needs for some of these things. And it doesn't matter how old you are, and how independent you are. And, sometimes you catch a cold and your brain's a bit foggy and you forget stuff. I know, I'm a woman, my hair is up today, but normally it's down and straightened. I unplugged that straightener because otherwise I'm certain I'm going to leave it on. And so, like, how can we make these little everyday things that much safer, through automation? And to your point, like, not using cameras everywhere to see who is where and are they doing what they're supposed to be doing, but using other forms of people censoring to ensure that, yes, somebody hasn't been in the bathroom for 3 hours, because maybe that's a problem. Like, maybe there's a problem there.
Yes.
Maybe it's a really good book, but maybe there's a problem there.
But that's the thing that a lot of people don't see, is it's not all or nothing. There's shades in between. Absolutely. Like, I talk to my daughters. I've got a 5 and a 7-year-old, and I want them to recognize what robot eyes look like. So we have a motion sensor light in our garage, and my littlest one, Margot, constantly tries to get into the house without it seeing her. But what we talk about is what it can see, and what it sees is movement only, right? It doesn't see shapes. It doesn't report back. It's almost like in a bathroom window, you often have it as being like frosted. Mm-hmm. So light can get in, but it doesn't result in exposure. And the same thing here, when we talk about like tracking now is so advanced that it can do elevation at a very small degree. So maybe outside of bed, if you notice that someone is very close to the ground, even for 15 minutes, that's something that would cue at least something to check in, right? Like, Medic Alert can go so much further than it was when the commercials were on when I was a kid, with the little thing on your
on fallen and I can't get up. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's the thing too. And that's where I think the twin challenge of, as we look towards the future and AI and, automation and machine learning, the biggest hurdle I think that we have to overcome is people's mindsets, right? Your point earlier about the self-driving car, I was having a conversation about this last night, actually. Something like 1 in 7 million kilometers, every 7 million kilometers, I think, a vehicle with full self-driving in the markets where that has been enabled, there will be an accident. Compare that to, I think it's like 480,000 miles for not self-driving. Like, the technology is not perfect, but the response times are lightning fast, much faster than a human is ever going to be capable of. And they've come a long way. And we need to really start looking at these technologies in terms of what they can do, and stop worrying so much about these edge cases. Oh, well, but there was that one car accident. Yeah, but there's, people text and drive. This is what we do. So how do we make that safer, knowing that it's a lot harder to change human behavior than to build technology to get around it? And I think it's the same type of mindset shift that we need to get to in terms of people tracking. When we're talking about keeping people safe in their homes, whether that be a communal environment or an individual environment, it's not about, I want to make sure that you're in your space and you're not going out and gallivanting. This isn't about curfews, and grounding somebody. It's about, are you safe? Have you fallen? Have you eaten? Do you have vital signs that we need to be monitoring more closely? And how do we take the onus off humans to do some of these other tasks and have alerting pop up? Because humans are fallible. Everywhere in the world, I think, is experiencing a labor shortage right now, and so we just don't have the bodies to rely on. And so getting through that mindset shift as well, without people feeling like technology is trying to babysit them, I think is also important.
But also in those situations where technology should babysit, right? Like, as somebody who has got a 5 and 7-year-old daughter, how do we get into a position where we can know where they are all the time? How do we get into a position where we're comfortable with sharing enough data that if they were to leave this municipality, an Amber Alert would happen on its own?
Yeah, and I think it's really funny because I think about when I was a kid, there were no well, cell phones existed, but like nobody had them. And it was my mom had to meet the other moms, and then it was free reign. I could go to all of these places, and I walked myself and all of these things. And then it became, you need to have a phone and or a device. We need to know where you are all the time because we're just so used to always being connected. But how do we use some of these technologies, not just from a safety perspective, but also to enable some of that freedom again and help build that muscle? I don't have kids, but I have like a lot of nieces and nephews, and I look at some of the advantages and opportunities that I had as a kid, and I wonder how we can enable some of those things within the context of how technology has changed everything in our lives.
Hmm. Yeah, like I remember independence was totally available as a kid. I think I was 6 years old when I started riding my bike to school, right? And I was free to make all of the mistakes, including, in our little town, riding down the main street among the cars, much to my parents. Oh, by the way, you being a rule follower, uh, I'll even you out. I believe
Perfect.
that the safety third, you know? Uh, so anyway, as part of that, that was a lot of independence, but it also changed and shaped who I am as a person. And that's what I really think about for my daughters is that I do want to be connected with them all the time, but that's not healthy for them. I want to be connected so that I feel as though they're safe. But where's the edge of that, right? In a place where humans are the biggest concern, like how do we get into that position? Like what I used to think is that we should have them all have dogs, right? In places like Germany, dogs can go everywhere. And when you see a child with a German shepherd, you're probably going to maybe pick another child if you're a nefarious person, right? But how do we get, like, that's the one thing I'm really wondering is when will we get to the point where it looks like every kid has a German shepherd?
That's a really great analogy, because that is exactly that. That is that intersection of you as a parent feeling like the child is safe and protected, and the child feeling like I've got all the freedom in the world, and I get to do it with my best friend. Um, right?
Hey, I
So
bring a dog to work every day. So I measure my life and how many dogs I can have in it.
I think cats are frowned upon at the office. So sadly, mine stay at home. But
Yeah, I don't think a cat would know what a job is. Um, dogs seem to be constantly looking for a job, and cats are like the alternative.
yeah, yeah, they lay on the keyboard, they bat the mouse off the table. Like you just don't get anything done with a cat around. So
Yeah, so maybe that's what some of those people need to like level them out. Is some of those people that are a little bit too much job oriented, they need an example, an animal example of how to be a feckless layabout.
so basically, what we're saying, I think, is that we just need more animals in everybody's lives.
Totally. And that's actually what I'm hoping for is as technology rises, that it will feel like that because our phones already do. Like, did you know when somebody loses their phone, they measure the psychological impact similar to when they lose a pet?
I have not. I was not aware of that, and yet it is not terribly surprising.
Yeah, so I'm wondering at what point we will actually look at this as endearing. Like I know that I do look at technology as being endearing. I find some things like they are like, baby entities in some cases. They can do very simple things once or twice, like but replicate really well. And it's interesting to kind of look at this through your lens. Is there anything else that looking forward into like how corporations are changing? And I noticed that in your leadership story, one, am I wrong in saying that being a default of being helpful was a real key for you?
It was, yeah, yeah. It absolutely was, and I think that's one of the things that has been a hallmark of the people that I tend to surround myself with is that desire to be helpful, and it's the desire to say like, I don't actually think this is my job, but we have some common goals. I'm going to try and help you. I'm going to help you figure this out, even if that just means I'm going to help you find the right team that can actually help you. Um, but just being available and being because it also gives an openness. You never know what's going to happen, right? Like people always say, you got to be good to be lucky and lucky to be good. But the the third piece of that is being open to opportunities and inviting opportunities by being available. I had a boss once tell me to keep a blank piece of paper on my desk, and even to do that metaphorically, so that when somebody comes with an opportunity, you've always got space to kind of think through those things. And that's a lot easier in theory than it is in practice, especially, when jobs get totally crazy and during the really nutso times. But that theme of find, like, where can you be helpful? Where can you just brighten someone's day? That it could also then, you never know what that's going to turn into and what snowball effect that's going to have in your personal life or in your career.
That's great. And also, it seems to me like this fail forward motion, where you basically find a way to get to the edge of your ability maybe and fall. But then there's that moment after where you pick yourself up. Where did that come from?
I don't know. I honestly don't know, other than I can't even say that it was something that was created, within my work setting. It's, I think, something that I've innately had. My parents raised me to believe that I could do absolutely anything that I put my mind to, much, I think, and that I could argue anything if I felt passionately about it, much to the chagrin of most of my teachers throughout, elementary and secondary and high school. But I think that mentality was just like, you can do it. You're probably the biggest thing standing in your own way. Has just been something I've been kind of raised and ingrained with.
That's great. And kudos to your parents, because
they're
that's
awesome.
exactly like what a great recipe to raise their daughter.
Yeah, I've been very lucky.
Well, I really appreciate you spending time with us this morning to talk a little bit about your leadership experience and everything else. We literally went everywhere.
We went a lot of places. Yeah. Thank you so much. This has been super fun. I think you know that I've had some mad nerves working up to this, because I'm a rule follower. There's a lot of part of me that likes structure, and we were coming into this with nothing, with the blank piece of paper for endless opportunity. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to get totally out of my comfort zone this morning as well.
I love it. And that's who I like to bring on to this podcast, is people that are just going to share themselves. We want to have coffee. We want to talk about things that are important and milestones and your opinions, but we also don't want anything boxed or canned. Like, the idea is that more people see examples of what leadership looks like in motion. It's not always together. It's not as you see. Most people just see victory moments from the outside, right?
Yeah. You need to see the mess in the middle. Absolutely.
It's where all the work gets done.
It is.
Well, thank you so much. This has been Cody Morash on Leadership Line of Sight. She is the manager of multi-suite products and services with TELUS Business. My name is Taylor. I'm the marketing strategist at Gravidia, and I hope that you have a remarkable day. Thanks for joining us on Leadership Line of Sight.